Welcome to Your Invisible Power with Life Mastery Consultant Christi Corradi. This is week 3.
Okay, so today is week 3 of Your Invisible Power by Genevieve Berand, written in 1921. And so it was mentioned to me that it's sometimes a difficult book to read, and that's why I teach the book, is so that we can unpack it and learn it and really get the benefit, because there's a lot of amazing method and material in this book. So let's start right where we start all of our work in this work, with our gratitudes and our proudest. And I will start by saying that my gratitude for today is to be on vacation. And this morning was just like the epitome of vacation. Nowhere to go, sit in the sun, and just kind of hang out. I had lunch with a friend of mine here in Seattle, but generally just kind of like a lazy, lovely day. And more travel begin tomorrow. We head off on a ferry to Canada and then hither and yon up into the wilds of Canada. So I am grateful for vacation and for this lazy day. And I'm proud of, even in my lazy days, of living these principles and really paying attention to my thoughts all the time. So take a moment and write your gratitude and proud of. And also we will do our one-liner from our vision. And let me just pull something out of mine. I am so happy and grateful now that I am physically fit and enjoy riding my bike. Part of my vision. That or something greater, and that or sometime sooner, right? Yes. I actually bought hiking boots for this trip, so I haven't been hiking in a long time. Okay, so think of your one-liner from your vision. You can write that down. So we are jumping into week 3 of Your Invisible Power. Now, I love storytelling, and I especially love telling stories as teaching points. So today I'm going to tell you the story of Genevieve, and actually a couple of other stories as well. And I know we touched on some parts of this last week, but this is more the meat of the story and the content, and actually that we want to glean from this work, The Invisible Power. So as you already know from last week's call, she was widowed, and she had a comfortable stipend, and she lived on what by all means should be plenty, and she should have been happy and content, but she felt discontent. This is key, and all of you have worked with me around this really powerful tool of our discontent. And she felt a longing. And that was the natural pull of the universe, to become greater, to experience things that have never been experienced before, to express the divine in a unique way, in a way that honors and inspires greater forward movement. And isn't it interesting? She got this desire as she was financially comfortable. You know, she was okay. And this is why we don't ignore the conditions of living a limited life. If you're living a limited life, you can't, or at least it's difficult, to explore the longing when you're in survival. Now, the good news is that you're in this work, and that if you are in survival and you're in this work and you understand it, then it is just like any other condition or circumstance. It's what we call it. There's this cute little baseball story. It goes like this. So at a baseball game, there was a close play. The coach on one team said that the player was safe, and the coach on the other side said he was out. And the umpire said, "It ain't nothing until I call it." Now, what if? What if whatever circumstances you are facing is actually your greatest tool, your stepping stone? Well, think if you even considered that, like you let that thought creep in, right? It changes everything. Really, think about it. It changes everything if you think, what if this is my greatest tool? You don't even need to know how. It's like, what if it is? And in thought and then in the actual principle with sustained thinking, remember this is sustained thinking, everything in the universe must make that settle. This is part of what the invisible principle is. So we talked about last week when Genevieve counted out $21,000 bills in her mind each night. And I think she even did this in a physical sense, that she had the actual motion of counting out 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, up to 20,000. Now remember last week I told you that today's equivalency of 20,000 is $250,000. So this was what would be considered a big dream. But she counted it out as if it was natural. And then she also imagined being on the ship and arriving in England, like not just being on the ship. She imagined her room and what it was like to walk the deck. You know, she really went through the steps and the stages, and then arriving in England and meeting Troward. Because remember, she hadn't even met Troward, right? And then the idea of working with him. This was her heart's desire. This was her longing to become a student of Thomas Troward. Now, she did all of this before she even asked him if he took students or if he would take her as a student. And so in a step in that direction, she asked a friend of hers to write him. Isn't that interesting? Because she thought that this friend might say it better or might get a better response. Isn't that interesting? And she never got a response to that person's letter. Until the very end, I think a letter came at the very end that said he doesn't take students. But it's funny how she doubted her own ability, and then there was no response at all. And then she did get that response, and rather than getting discouraged, this is key, she relied on the memories of knowing the truth of who she is. And this is why we write our assets list. And we don't want to just write them, we want to use them. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. This is a powerful tool in using the invisible power, is to have your asset list. What have you accomplished? So, you know, she gets a response, he's not a teacher, she books her passage on the trip anyway. I guess it was actually once she booked her passage, she actually got the response that said that he did not take students. And this is where she says a very powerful line. It's on page 62 of the pink book and 57 of the white and blue book. One of the most powerful statements, I think, of the whole book. I declined to be discouraged. I declined to be discouraged. And why? She had had an experience of having already physically experienced the dream itself already taking place. So she felt it. She knew it somewhere within the essence of her own body. And, you know, many of you have heard this story about when I decided to get a total knee replacement. And I had some very well-known and powerful people try to discourage me from having this surgery. But I didn't let that dissuasion get me. Why? Because remember, we want to watch out for dissuasion, distraction, and DEFCON 5, right? That just like blows us out of the water. These are all our old paradigms trying to keep us from that longing. And remember that longing, that desire in us, if we use the 5-question test, does it bring me life? Is there good in it for others? Does it align with my core values? Or do I need a higher power? And does it cause me to grow? And we say to ourselves, this desire, if we can say yes to all of those questions, then this desire is that greater power wanting to express itself through us. And so what did I want in this situation when I decided to have the total knee replacement? It was I wanted health and well-being. And I imagined myself mainly running with my son. He had said to me one time, "Mommy, I wish you could run with me." Oh, break my heart, right? And I did eventually run with him. But I didn't let these people dissuade me, and that's for two reasons. One is because I had a great coach, and that was Mary, and she really coached me through that. And the other is that I had a very clear vision. I planned to travel 7 months after my knee surgery to paint sunflowers in France, right? And I already had everything booked. I knew that this was happening. And then the day before the surgery, the doctor's office called and told me something was wrong with our insurance, and they had to postpone the surgery for 3 months. And, well, for me, the math didn't add up. I couldn't imagine myself going to France and tromping around the sunflower fields 3 months after my surgery. So I told them that they couldn't cancel it, and they said unless I could get the insurance cleared up in the matter of hours, they had to give the appointment to someone else, and I begged them to wait. Okay, give me those couple of hours. And yes, there was doubt and there was faltering, but that vision, remember what Wayne Dyer, bless his soul, said, you know, what you get when you squeeze an orange, you get orange juice, and that's what we want to have inside of us. So much is orange juice that when we get squeezed, what comes out of us is the truth of our knowing. And my truth of knowing was I knew I was tromping around the fields of France. And so when I got squeezed and they said, you couldn't do this, I said, no, you're wrong. And hold on. Now, I called Jerry, I called my husband, and yes, the first thing I did was cry, right? I had my human moment. And then I said, Jerry, I need to have the surgery now. I'm going to France in 7 months. And it didn't matter. He just rises to the occasion. And he was going to meet me for part of that trip, so he probably had an invested interest as well. So he called our insurance company, and the check had never arrived. We called the bank. The check had never been cashed. So he left work, and he went to our bank and got a cashier's check. He drove 2 hours into San Francisco and went to the headquarters of the insurance company. He paid it. He had them call the doctor's office. And the next morning, I was in having my surgery. And 7 months later, of course, right? Not, oh, how excited I was. And, yeah, there was excitement. But really, it was, of course, I knew this was the truth. I was painting sunflowers in France. And my website and my business cards are all made from some of the paintings I did when I was in France. Okay, so this is an important key. This is what she did. This is what Genevieve did, right? Is she held the image so clear that even when he said, I don't take students, she says, I decline to be discouraged. Very important. The next step that's very important is that she left no stone unturned. She did everything that she could. He said at one point, a little later in the book, he says, well, maybe we could talk later. Why don't you write me in the meantime? She didn't wait. She started writing him immediately. And he wrote her back, and he invited her to his home, but still no offer to study. And then she was given, I mean, it's got a funny, quirky little story in there, but it's really to show you that perseverance is very important here, to really hold clear on your dreams. Ask yourself those 5 questions. Does it give me life? Is there good in it for others? Do I need a higher power? Does it align with my core values? And does it cause me to grow? So this idea of leaving no stone unturned reminds me of this story I heard. It's supposed to be a true story about a guy who was studying physics in grad school, and it was coming to the final, and the professor had said that whoever did the best on the test would get the job in the department. And this guy really wanted the job. He needed the job, and so he studied and studied. And the night before the test, he studied really late and got up a little bit late. He ran to the test and got there just in time as the test was starting. So he did his work. He finished the test. But he noticed on the board there was a problem up on the board, and so he figured he needed to do that as well. Well, he worked on it and worked on it and worked on it, and finally he turned in his answer. And over the weekend, he got a call from his professor. And not only did he do the best on the test, but the professor was amazed that he had solved the problem on the board. See, Because he was late, he hadn't heard the professor say, if you finish early, you can play with the problem on the board. It was a problem that had never been solved, not even by Einstein. Now think, if we approached all of our dreams as if it was normal to reach them, to live them. Unless he had been told that story, he believed it was possible for himself to solve the problem, and his dream coming true depended on it, so he solved the problem. And I guess this is some famous story in physics or something like that. So anyway, this all comes around to, of course, Genevieve Berand became the student of Thomas Troyer, and she loved to boast the only student of Thomas Troyer because he didn't take anyone else. And if you read his letter at the end of chapter 10, it's actually very sweet and dear. There's something I do want to read you here. Now, faith, and we're going to study more about faith next week as well, but faith has a huge part in this. On page 75, chapter 12, this is called How to Increase Your Faith. And one of the things he says here is, how can I speak the word of faith when I have little or no faith? Okay, well, guess what? We all have faith, and you can read more about this in this chapter. It's a good little chapter to read. We all have faith, but what is our faith in? Limited time, failure, disappointment. Faith is a quality of power which gives the creative energy a corresponding vitality, right? That thinking stuff, that creative energy, that power, that stuff that is malleable and pliable and turns into form. Faith is the quality of power which gives the creative energy a corresponding vitality, and whatever that is again. And so that is. And so we must stand guard at the portal of our mind. Okay, at the bottom of page 75 there, it says, your constant observation should be of your state of consciousness when you did, and what she means by when you did is your asset list, the things that you have accomplished. You want to return to a vibrational frequency that you know well. And so you have your asset list of the things that you have accomplished. So your constant observation should be of your state of consciousness when you did, not when you hoped you might. Because think about that idea of hoping that you might. Hoping, actually, in this sense, means doubt, like, oh, I wish, like, maybe. But when you rely on an energy of something that you've already done, you know it. You know it's possible, right? So not when you hoped you might, but feared it was too good to be true. How did you feel that time when you simply had to bring yourself into a better frame of mind and did? Or you had to have a certain thing and got it, had to, right? And sometimes that have to is a very powerful energy, but we want, instead of having to out of lack or desire, we want to use that same kind of energy of have to match our longing and our greater expression of life, not out of lack, right? Live these experiences over and over again mentally until you feel in touch with the self that knows and does, and then the best there is yours, right? And there is no doubt that it is yours. And then, as stated in chapter 13, you are not a victim to the universe, but a part of it. Isn't that kind of a revelation? You are not a victim of the universe, but a part of it. Think of it, you're part of like the flowing energy of the universe. And you can only be a victim if you give away your power. And the way most of us give away our power is blame. Think of it, it's the other guy's fault. When we do this, you really have no ability to change it. When I used to work with the teens, this was one of the most powerful concepts I felt I could offer them, is if they did not give away their power through blame and took whatever responsibility they needed in it, then they could solve the problem. right? They had a chance, they had the energy, but if it's all up to the other person, we've been told our whole lives, you can't change the other person, you can only change yourself. Well, here's a great example of that. If you are blaming the other, then I had a really amazing experience of this with some family issues that came up the other day, and I just kind of wanted to step into blame. And then I went, you know what? If I look at what actions I can take in this, it's all about my inner healing, my healing who I am and my responsibility. And no surprise, it all shifted around when I changed inside of me. A phone call came in not more than a half an hour later, of course, right? So I'm going to end by telling you about this is on page 80 in the pink book. I don't know what it is in the blue book, but it's chapter 15. And it's about this guy. It's just a nice illustration, this guy who is an Australian millionaire, and you can read about the story. But down towards the bottom of that, it says, if there was a power within himself which was able to capture the idea, then there must be a responsive power within the idea itself. So he had this idea of growing plants out in the desert of Australia or something like this. But he realized, and Genevieve, in expressing this story, realized that if the idea can come into our mind or our thinking, then within the idea itself, there was a responsive power, right, which could bring itself into a practical, physical manifestation. We were just talking about this last night. Henry Ford had a table of inventors sitting around, and he said, I want you to invent and describe what is now known as the combustion engine. And they said, it's not possible. And he said, I know it's possible because I can think it. And I'm going to look for somebody who can think it along with me. And, of course, we know that was possible because we use the combustion engine, right? So back to this guy, Tyson, right? He resolutely put aside all questions as to the specific ways and means. Remember the how. And some of his was on how to generate the funds to be able to do this, right? So he put aside all questions as to the specific ways and means which would be employed in bringing his desire into physical manifestation, and simply kept his thoughts centered upon the idea of making fences and seeing flowers and grass where none existed at the time. So in other words, he held fast to his vision, to his dream. Down towards the bottom it says, along comes another idea from no one can tell where, and finds friendly lodgings with the idea. So anyway, we know these principles, okay? So this is the stuff that we've been studying over and over again, and I just like this other little viewpoint. I mean, just the idea that within the idea itself is a responsive power, or there would not have been the idea generated. Right? So whatever your desire is, whether it is in having the money to give you the same power, sometimes we think money is outside of the principle, but it's not. It is the principle in action. And so we want to apply all of this knowingness. Use our assets list. Use our vision. Really hold the vibration each and every moment you can possibly remember, to hold the vibrational frequency of your vision as if it is already happening, as if it is already taking place. And as I mentioned before, Genevieve was working with $20,000 in 1919 was, I think, when she was doing this. And that was the equivalency of $250,000. She had the faith, the belief, the knowing of her desire to that degree. And I want each one of you to have that power, that degree within your work, within your vision. And whatever I can do to help and support you in holding that, that's what we're here for.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. Here are 2 exclusive podcast listener offers. First, for a limited time, podcast listeners can work with Christi in person at a deep discount. Christi offers a unique coaching modality of her own creation that helps clients discover their own answers to where they're stuck and how to move forward. As one of her clients puts it, it always works. This transformative process is designed to help you identify blocks and create breakthroughs in your personal and professional life. As a thank you for listening to the podcast, you're eligible for a special discount. Normally $97 for a half-hour introductory session, podcast listeners get a $70 discount automatically applied if you use this link, masteringtheartoflife.com/podcast-IWD-offer. That's masteringtheartoflife.com/podcast-IWD-offer. And that link is in the podcast general description as well. Second, you can get the entire library of Mastering the Art of Life with PDF notes and worksheets for each lesson, plus bonuses at no cost at masteringtheartoflife.com/9-month opt-in, all one word, masteringtheartoflife.com/9-month opt-in. That link is also in the general podcast description.